Oh, thanks, everybody. Welcome to Build. Thanks. Our next guest is one of the funniest people on television and one of the funniest shows ever, maybe the funniest show ever. For years, she's played Cheryl David, wife and ex-wife of Larry in the now in its 10th season, Curb Your Enthusiasm. But as of last night, Cheryl Hines can add director of Curb Your Enthusiasm to her resume as well. Please give it up for the great Cheryl Hines. Let's hear it. Hey.
Thank you.
Yeah, of course. So it's like happy 10th anniversary, but at the same time, the show has been on for like 20 years at this point, right?
Yeah. So we and I say we like I had anything to do with it, but Larry would take years off.
His sweet ass time in between seasons.
His sweet ass time is what I meant to say, and then just do another season when he felt inspired.
So what was that? What is that like for you as a cast member? How does that work?
It's a little maddening. I mean, at first it drove me crazy.
I mean, just contractually speaking, are you still, because the way that normally works is you're contractually obligated, but you're going every year. So that's
right.
Yeah.
That's right. So in this business, we have things called first position and second position. Yeah. So if you're on a show and you have a contract with them, even though you don't know if it's coming back or not, you're in first position to that show. So if you audition for something else or a different show and you get it, you're in second position. Does that make sense? So you're sort of obligated if Curb comes back to do that, which of course I'd always want to do. But anyway, yeah, so that's been a little challenging throughout the years.
What was it like? Did you audition for Curb to get on?
You know, when I auditioned for Curb, it was just for a 1 hour special. So this show did not start out as a series. It was just going to be, a comedy special. So the idea was Larry was going to return to stand-up comedy, and that was what the special was about. And in the special, he never actually goes on stage to do it. So when I went to audition, all I knew was there was no script. It was all improvised. I didn't really know who Larry David was. I mean, I knew he created Seinfeld with Jerry Seinfeld, but I didn't know what he looked like. I didn't know very much about him.
I don't think anyone really did outside of those who'd worked with him.
Right. Yeah. Which was probably good for me. Because knowing what I know now, okay. And so
we're going to get back to that in a second.
So when I was walking down the hallway of HBO to go audition, they just said, listen, there's no script, and they wanted to feel like it's a documentary. So if there's ever a false or fake moment, the audition will be over. And don't touch Larry. He doesn't like for people to touch him. I was like, what? Where am I going right now? And then I met Larry, and we get along really, really well. And I don't know, the rest is history. So then the 1 hour special aired, and HBO really liked it, and Larry liked it, and I don't know. The next thing you know, Larry called me and said, "Did I want to play his wife on a series?"
So you weren't playing his wife in the special?
No, I was.
Oh, you were?
Yeah.
Okay.
I auditioned for his wife in a special, and then he said, "It's going to be a series. Do you want to continue to play my wife?"
Did you feel like when you had the audition that you and Larry had a very specific kind of chemistry right off the bat?
I did.
Because you do.
Yeah, it's funny because I met him. You know how it is in life. You meet some people and you're like, oh, I feel like I know you, but I don't know you.
Right.
So with Larry, I met him in the room, and he said, imagine that we have kids. Because at that point, we didn't know if we were going to have kids or not on the show. If it were only that easy in life, right? Do you or don't you want to? So I said, okay. And he said, and I don't eat chicken anymore. I said, okay. And he said, okay, so then we'll just start talking. I said, okay. So then we start talking and doing the scene. And he asked me what we're having for dinner. And I said, we're having green beans and potatoes and chicken cacciatore. And he said, well, I'm not eating chicken. I said, yeah, you don't have to eat the chicken. And he said, but why are we having chicken? I go, because the rest of us still eat chicken. So you don't have to eat the chicken, but we are still eating chicken. He said, well, why would you make chicken? So and this is what we talked about for, 5 minutes.
But that's amazing because he gave you something and you knew how to set him up right away.
Yeah, because I figured that must be important. The chicken must be part of the scene.
I mean, he didn't tell you you're making chicken, and I don't eat chicken anymore. He said, I don't eat chicken, and you found a way to pull out of him a grievance.
Right. What would bother Larry?
Which is the entire show.
I figured it out.
Yeah. After that, I mean, the two of you have this incredible chemistry, which is that you seem consistently both delighted and irritated by him.
Yes.
More so than every other cast member. Like Jeff is just delighted by him.
Right.
Susie is just irritated by him.
Yes.
You are delighted and irritated.
That's true.
How did you develop that over the course of these 20 years? Or was that something that is just sort of naturally your relationship with Larry David?
Yes. Well, you know, I figured if this woman is married to him, there must be something that she likes about him. And Larry, in real life, is a very smart man. I mean, even on the show, he's a smart man. So he's very smart. He's funny. So I appreciate that about him in real life and on the show. So I appreciate that. And I like, you know, on the show, we have a friendship that has a lot of texture to it.
Well, I think like any marriage or former marriage, there's like a deep understanding of the other person.
Right.
Or at least for you of him. I don't know if he deeply understands anybody.
No, I don't think he takes the time or cares to deeply understand anyone else. Yeah.
Throughout the course of the show, well, talk to me about how you got to direct the episode last night. I know you've directed a feature film prior, and I think some other episodic work as well.
I have.
But in 20 years, this is the first episode of Curb that you've directed. How did that come about?
Larry called me and asked me if I was interested in directing one of the episodes.
Wow.
Yeah, I know. I was really surprised, and
had you pitched yourself before to do it, or
no. But I had been talking to him about. I was getting ready to direct a feature film, so we'd been talking about it, and then I got a phone call from him, and it was like, "Wow, yes, I would like to." So that's how it came about.
Now, directing an episode of Curb is obviously, I mean, you have a ton of experience because you've been there for so long. You see how it's done. But it's a lot different than directing a feature film, or I imagine like the feature film you directed before, in the sense that you are improvising a lot and directing improvisation. How did you find it?
Well, the challenging thing about directing an improvised show is that you have to have a camera on both people in the scene at the same time because you don't know what anybody's going to say. So if I said, "Oh, my aunt died," I need to have your reaction to it. And because there are no lines, you might overlap something while I'm saying something. So you have to have two cameras going at least at the same time, covering each person. And usually when you're directing something or shooting something, you shoot one side of it and you have it all lit very beautifully, and you
turn it around.
And then you turn it around. But on Curb, it's different. You light the whole thing, and you don't know what characters are going to say or do, where they're going to walk, or if they're going to sit down or not. So you kind of have to be ready for everything.
Is part of the, not necessarily difficulty, but the challenge of directing Curb is knowing how far to push it? Like, for instance, in the episode last night, the scenes with Larry's new lawyer felt pushed much further than previous scenes with him, which I loved. It was like, how far can we take this disagreement between these two men? This subtle, weird, like nothing disagreement between the two of them, and just keep it going and going and going until like it really has to end.
Yeah, that's a good question, because I mean, I think that's the essence of Curb, is that line that you cross. Like, most people in real life, if we were getting on each other's nerves, we'd probably like find an exit. An exit. But yeah, those two in the office, neither wants to back down, and neither one of them is gonna find a good way out. And that's what's exciting about it, because you let it go, And then in the editing room, you figure out what's too far.
Well, because some scenes of Curb feel mostly based around the story beat, right? We have to get the story beat out, and while they're improvising to get it out, it's maybe a quick scene. With The Lawyer, it really felt like someone enjoyed doing these scenes to like the extreme, and so therefore you were allowed to.
You know what I love? I actually love the scenes with The Lawyer because they are sort of quiet and intimate, and in a small office with two guys just being idiots. No, just one guy being an idiot. But I like that they're like the little moments.
Yeah.
So
exactly.
I really enjoy that.
And it's also one of the ways that Curb works so well is that you really experience Larry as a creator enjoying the presence of his fellow performers. And that's where the core cast, I think, has really come from, and some guests. But every now and then there's a new guest who you're like, oh, he just like loves working with this person.
Yeah. You definitely can feel that from Larry. He doesn't hide it. He doesn't hide anything, which is good. But yeah, some actors really get to him, really tickle him.
What has been the toughest part about playing Cheryl over the years?
Keeping a straight face. It's true because it's improvised. I don't know what anybody's going to say, and so and because it's improvised, and because both people are being covered at the same time, you can't break because it'll ruin Larry's take.
Yeah, you can't even smirk. Right.
So, I mean, he does. He breaks all the time. But if we break, he gets so mad because he's like, I held it together and you ruined it. So I've learned to, I bite the inside of my cheek sometimes. Like when I know he's saying something that's so crazy. And in real life, I would love to laugh. I just bite the inside of my cheek until it hurts enough that I don't laugh.
I don't understand how everybody on the show is funny. I don't understand how people don't just constantly break to JB. Like there was an episode after Larry had slept with you, and Larry was walking up the stairs, and JB was screaming like, "Who you smashing, Larry?
Yeah, tapping.
Who you tapping, Larry?" And I was, how did he do this scene? JB is so funny.
JB is really funny.
Yeah.
He's really funny. I mean, listen, a lot of times people do break. I'll be honest with you. But I don't know. Yeah, Larry does a lot of his scenes with JB, and I don't know how he doesn't break. But there's some outtakes. I remember, I don't know how dirty we can get.
Yeah,
Oh, okay.
yeah, of course.
Okay, cool. When JB moved into Larry's house, and Larry found ejaculate on the comforter, and he was accusing JB, and then JB was giving all the reasons why he would never masturbate in that room, and the conversation was so funny, and it took a very long time for Larry to get through that scene because he broke so much. But
I think it's the same season, but my favorite JB moment is when Larry is confronted with like a neo-Nazi at the dentist's office or something, and he tells JB, and JB gives him this whole long lecture of how to kick this guy's ass, and one of them is to like open his asshole and spray paint inside and leave Snicker wrappers inside of it. And Larry repeats it, and he's like, okay, I opened the asshole, I spray paint.
I'm sure that took a few takes.
Yeah. Do you find that you are a big breaker? Like, who is the big breaker on set?
Larry.
Really? Because it's always said that he doesn't really laugh that much.
Well, if he's watching something that's funny, he'll say, "Oh yeah, that's funny."
Right.
But in real life, if JB is going off, or Wanda Sykes, or somebody's like getting to him, he will really break and will have a hard time coming back to it. But in real life, he doesn't like throw his head back and laugh at stuff. But on the set, especially when people are calling him names, like the worse the name, the harder the laugh.
Over the past few seasons, you have developed a relationship with Ted Danson. Your character has.
Yes.
What has it been like working with him in that regard?
super sexy. Ted is this amazing person. Like whoever you think Ted Danson might be, that's who he is.
Well, he's married to Mary Steenburgen,
married
so
to Mary,
he can't not be amazing.
Those two, I always tell him I can't even imagine what goes on in your house. Could I get you something? Can I get you something? You're beautiful. You're beautiful. Yeah. I mean, just imagine the two of the nicest, like most considerate people ever on the earth live together. It's just
so exotically beautiful people
as
well.
Both just magically beautiful, through the years. I mean, so Ted is very genuine, and he's so professional, and I love working with him because I love to hear all of his stories. I'm fascinated by people's journeys. I was on the set this year with JB and Ted and Susie, and I was just so interested to hear. I made him tell the story about how he got Cheers, and I was asking JB about SNL because he auditioned for SNL and he didn't get it, but they asked him to be a writer. And I mean, I sit on set sometimes and just feel like, whoa, I can't believe this is my job and I get to show up and hang out with these guys.
You were an improviser, right? Prior to Curb? Yeah.
Yeah. So I went to the Groundlings
That's what I thought,
Theater in LA, and I learned how to improvise and to do sketch comedy there. And actually, I was in the company when I got Curb Your Enthusiasm, but I would have never gotten this show if I didn't have improv background.
I would imagine because an improv background teaches you a lot of things, but one of the main things it teaches you is don't try to be funny. And Curb is essential for the people around Larry is to and Larry himself, don't try to be funny. The writing itself or the ideas themselves are funny.
Right. That's exactly right. So Larry writes an outline for the show. And for the first 3 seasons, I never got to see it. So I would just show up on the set and say, what is this episode about? And he's like, need to know basis. Don't worry about it. But he was so worried about showing anybody the outline because he didn't want anyone to think ahead and think about funny things they might say because he wanted people to play the reality of the scene, of the situation. And it worked out really well. He lets me see them now. But
what changed his mind in letting you see them? Just knowing that he trusted you?
Yeah, I think it was trust. It took 3 years. I said, I promise you, I will not think about this again. I won't even remember what this is by the time we start shooting. And I was so glad that he let me see that year's outlines because one of the script said, Cheryl's in a bathing suit and Larry's fully dressed. And I'm like, oh my God, were you not going to tell me that? I mean, it would have been, I showed up on the set and they would say, here's a bathing suit. Right. And that's just not how it works in Hollywood. Yeah. We need self-tanners and we need, a few days of detox, if you will.
Yeah, you tell me that I'm going to be in a bathing suit on camera. I'm going to need a week of push-ups and
You need
fasting
a little bit of time. A little bit of time.
When it comes to directing, when did you decide that you wanted to direct? How did that begin for you?
Well, I was in the movie Waitress that Adrienne Shelley had written, that she also starred in, she also directed. And I loved Adrienne. We got along really, really well. And she was tragically killed here in New York. And her husband, Andy Ostroy, was just so devastated. And he had a script that she had written that she had left behind. And he called and said, would you be interested in directing this feature film? Because I feel like you would understand the tone that she was going for. And I was like, are you talking to me?
Had you directed anything prior to that?
I directed television.
Okay.
I directed television. So, I really thought about it. I read the script, and I had to think about it and to really do some soul searching. And I called some of my director friends, like Larry Charles and David Steinberg and Barry Sonnenfeld. And I said, should I do this or should I not? And they all said, do it. We'll help you. Call me, text me anytime with questions. And I did. And it was stressful.
Yeah.
It's a stressful job. Directing is very stressful. But
nonstop decision making, nonstop compromise, nonstop being told no.
And it's not only all of that, but things that you can't control.
Yep.
Like you cannot control the rain, right? So you're shooting in a sound stage and it's raining and you can hear it on the roof, and then what? And then what happens,
Yeah.
Or when we were shooting Serious Moonlight, this movie, Meg Ryan and Kristen Bell were in it, and they had this scene, this kind of intense scene outside, and there was a frog that was so loud, so loud, and they kept doing the scene, and then this frog would. One of the producers was like, "I will give someone $1,000 to find that friggin' can I?
Yeah.
That fucking frog." But you can't even imagine, like, who would know? How could you know that a frog would ruin your shooting day? But yeah, it's all the things that can go wrong that you can't even see coming.
Yeah.
That are so stressful.
Yeah, that's the compromise, right? Where it's like, okay,
Yeah.
well, let's wait for the frog, and then we'll have less time to shoot this emotional scene.
I know. You cannot outweight a frog, by the way.
When you finished shooting Serious Moonlight, was it so I'm sure it was rewarding in a lot of ways, but were you like, I don't need to direct anything for a little while, or were you ready to direct immediately?
Well, I was so stressed that I've never seen it since, fortunately, but I have a vein in my forehead that was sticking out like a half an inch. It was like this vein that I was so glad I wasn't in that movie, because I was like, this would be such a nightmare for a director to see an actor come to work every day with a vein sticking out of her head. It was, one of the things that was stressful about Serious Moonlight was because Adrian had written it, and because Andy, her husband, really wanted to keep every word of the script exactly the same. That was very complicated and challenging. And it's funny because I'm still good friends with Andy, and we talk, and we were just talking the other day, and he said, what I asked you to do was impossible. He said, because I asked you to direct that movie, and within a year of Adrian passing, we had finished that film. He said, and for me to ask you to do a script where you can't change one thing about it, he said, knowing what I know now, it's almost impossible. Because like you're saying, I mean, things come up, and let's say the frog scene, if you could change a word of it, you could say, that fucking frog.
Oh, that frog, yeah.
But when you can't, it's challenging. There are challenging things about it.
I'd imagine there was also an added stress, might not be the right word, maybe a weight, given the fact that it was Adrian's script in the wake of her passing, and you couldn't change a word, and it was very much a dedication to her and keeping her memory alive.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was there was a heaviness to it, because Adrian and Andy have a daughter, and I have a daughter, and they're the same age. So when we were shooting this, Andy and his daughter were hanging out at my house, and I was in the other room, and I heard our daughters playing with each other, and I heard her daughter. I mean, they were little at this point. They were 3 or 4, maybe 4 or 5, maybe. And she had a toy telephone, and she was like, "Mommy, I can't hear you. Mommy, I can't hear you." And it was just like some moments were just,
You were grieving. You were going through
grieving.
grief, yeah.
Yeah, and trying to make the best movie you could make in 15 days. So it was a lot, and it was. But, and at the same time, it was probably healing, I know, for Andy, because I know, you know, when you lose somebody, it's overwhelming.
Yeah.
And it's hard to know how to grieve, and it's hard to know how to put one foot in front of the other. And what do you do now? So for him, that's what he wanted to do. And I was so touched to be a part of it. But yet, at the same time, it was, you know, it was bigger than just making a movie.
And when you wrapped up, you were like, I'm good with directing for a little
Good
bit.
for a little while. Yeah, I was. I remember asking, I saw Jay Roach, who's director, at a party, and we were talking, and I said, you know, when I was directing, there were times that felt so stressful. It must get easier. I mean, you've directed so many movies.
Such a large scale, too.
Yeah, exactly. And I said, so when you have a bigger budget, is it get easier? And he said, no. He said, it's just even more stressful. He said, every time I do a movie, I think, okay, I've just knocked off 2 years of my life. I'm like, oh my God, why do you keep doing
That's
this?
what I wonder sometimes when I talk to directors. I'm like, what are you doing this for?
But, you know, it is very rewarding. You know, I remember, because you get to do things that you don't get to do as an actor. When we did the score for that film, it was here in New York, and it was really an amazing experience. I went into the studio, and these musicians came in, and we had the film up on a screen, and they were just sight reading the music, and just, you know, in a very moving way, these very, very talented musicians all working together to create this film. It was just really amazing.
When you're directing Curb, how involved is Larry in the episode with you while you're shooting? Because, I mean, he is coming up with the outline. He is the executive producer. I imagine he has a very big creative hand scene by scene.
It is definitely Larry's vision.
Yeah.
You know, so Larry is a part of every moment in every scene. So it is definitely about bringing his vision to life. So he definitely has an opinion about it, but he also is open to, oh, you watched it, you can see it in a way I can't see it. So he definitely listens and wants to hear certain people's opinion. He doesn't need everyone's opinion, trust me.
Of course. I mean, no one does.
Nobody
when you're
does,
making
no.
something. Yeah, then you just get bogged down and start questioning what you're doing because you've gotten too many opinions.
Yeah.
The end of last night's episode, we were talking about this in the green room, and it's one of the few times where the show goes as broadly comic as possible.
Yes.
Three Stooges level comedy. Busted teeth, like can't talk.
Yes. I'm getting nervous just thinking about it.
Why are you getting nervous?
Well, because that's not usually my vibe. It's not usually like big, broad, physical comedy. But for that particular episode, because Larry was doing a big nod to the Three Stooges, we had to go big or go home. So even that last scene where, if you haven't seen it, it's okay. You'll get through it. Where the three guys are dumped into the trash cans, and so you see their legs sticking up out of the trash cans. And I was like, do we have to go that big? Could it just be... Could it just be you? Or could we just see that you're headed to the trash cans? And he was like, no, it's got to be three of us. It has to be our feet dangling out. I was like, okay, it's your show. Then yes, let's do it.
So dumb. I loved it.
So dumb and so broad. But sometimes, you know, I'm not breaking news here, but he's a comedic genius, right? So he's so good at and masterful at bringing other elements into shows, just like he did in Seinfeld. He does it in Curb, but not that often. But this was definitely stylized specifically to the Three Stooges.
Well, there's something about that how broad the Three Stooges were doesn't really exist anymore, even in the broadest form of comedy at this moment. So there's a layer of it that's almost like it's going back to not even being that broad anymore, and it's too silly and esoteric and dumb for like a broad mainstream audience to understand. Like I could see a lot of people being like, "This is too dumb," whereas I'm watching and being like, "This is so great and dumb. I can't believe they're going this far."
Well, that was also a concern. Is are people even going to realize that this is a nod to the Three Stooges? So even when this was another like note trying to give Larry David a note. When Larry and JB, Leon and Jeff were going up to this buffet, they were like elbowing each other out of the way. And I said, "Can we do a take where you guys aren't so big, like just trying to get to the scrambled eggs?" And Larry's like, "No, it's got to be. We've got to be." It's like, okay. But then I was like, what if some of the people that are watching this don't know the Three Stooges?
Oh.
And it's like, well, then that's their fault.
I mean, I vaguely know the Three Stooges from growing up with like reruns and stuff like that. But I was like, as soon as Jeff showed up and had a speech impediment as well, and the two of them did, I was like, we're in Three Stooges territory.
Yes.
This is, and also the fact that, like I said before, he invites Jeff to come along, and Jeff with no motive whatsoever, which no one in that show ever does anything without a motive.
Right.
Just does it.
Gets in the car,
Yeah.
right.
He goes, "Oh, okay, sure."
Yeah. So there's a scene and then where Larry and Leon are getting ready to go somewhere, and Jeff pulls up to the house.
For no reason.
They never say why. And they say, "Get in the car." And he's like, "Okay." Although it's like then he had bitten his tongue and he's supposed to be talking, and Jeff is like, "Da, da, 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 da." I said, "You have to at least articulate a word enough so we can understand what you're saying." It's like, okay.
But they even changed their walk. Like the way they were walking through the party is very Three Stooges as well. Like not just the speech impediment. Like, yeah, I don't know. This being your first episode as a director, I don't know how you were able to kind of like handle that, because he was throwing something so different
I had to be strong-armed. I had no choice.
Yeah, but he was. It's not like you were showing up and doing like a standard Curb Your Enthusiasm episode. He was throwing some pretty heavy curveballs at you.
That's true. But in his defense, he gave me a few episodes to choose from, and I chose that one. Yeah. So what was I thinking?
What made you choose that one?
You know what? I liked. There's a storyline going on in this season about sexual harassment, and Larry's being an idiot, and he, used his assistants, who is a woman, used her shirt tail to clean his glasses without her permission, and that's kind of weird and creepy. And then it just turns into one thing after another. And in the season, in this episode it directed, Laverne Cox is she's in the show, and there's just something about Larry gets in trouble. And he goes to a woman's, awards ceremony about,
Survivors, women survivors,
yes.
I believe. Yeah.
So I thought it would be fun and interesting, and I wanted to keep an eye on things. I thought maybe it would be good to have a woman's voice in there, even though. On one hand, I don't want to say we're making fun of the situation, because we're not. So that was part of it. I want to make sure that we weren't making fun of it, because they're a very serious subject. And on the other hand, there's a way. The funny part is how Larry perceives everything.
The joke is always on Larry.
It's always on Larry, so I wanted to make sure it was on Larry, and that it never like crossed over into something else, which it didn't. And it was, we were mindful about it.
Sorry, I was just reminded of his doodle.
His doodle. And by the way, so in this episode, if you haven't seen it, somebody asked Larry to do a doodle for a charity. And so he does a dumb doodle. And then he gets there, and everybody else has drawn these beautiful pictures. And it makes Larry angry, because that's not a fucking doodle. That's a sketch. That's a painting. And he gets mad about it. And as a matter of fact, my husband in real life Bobby Kennedy Jr., is a very good artist. And I asked him to do one of the
Oh, and his name is there.
Yes!
Yeah.
And that's really his picture.
Oh, wow. That's so cool.
Yeah. So when you go back and watch it, you can freeze frame it.
I have to ask, what was it like doing that scene with Laverne Cox? Because Larry does ask some despicable questions of Laverne in that scene. How did you work that out with her? How did you guys? How did all of you talk about it?
It's so sweet that you think that there was a conversation. Well, first of all, Laverne is very funny, and she's very smart, and she really holds her own with Larry.
I love the I think I got this.
So, I wanted to keep checking in with Laverne and make sure that no lines were crossed and that, being a transgender person, that he's not really crossing a line. But also, she knows what the show is, and she said yes to it, and she's like, yeah, let's have fun. I'll tell you if it's too much, which is good. So, so it never, there was never a moment where it was like, yes, we were sitting behind the monitors going, oh, dear God, please don't. But she, handled herself quite well.
He just has that shit-eating grin on his face while he's asking these horrifically stupid things of her.
So bad.
Yeah.
Yeah, what was he talking? Oh, can you donate your penis as an organ?
I'm an organ donor.
Yeah.
And
And then you're just like, I'm just in Video Village, like sweating, like, oh my God, please stop talking.
Laverne, let me ask you a question.
Yeah, Laverne, let me ask you a question. It's like, please don't.
No, as soon as he said that, this is bad.
Just don't. Yeah.
We have time for a couple questions from the audience. Who has a question? Right here.
You already answered my original question, but I have a related question. What was it like working with Robert Einstein? Because whenever he would come on screen, he would just crack me up before he even said anything. There was something inherently funny about him.
Yeah.
Marty Funkhauser.
Marty Funkhauser. Bob was, he was just a force, and he was, he always seemed like he was in such a great mood and always making everybody laugh. Listen, nobody was safe. If we would have background on, and he would be like, I probably shouldn't be saying this. It's okay. But we were like at a funeral, and the background would be here, and he's like, "Who is this supposed to be? Is this supposed to be my aunt? I don't think so." It's like, Bob. Stop. He's like, "No, look, we're not even from the same town, but from the same family." And it's like, oh my God. So he was always making everybody laugh.
I really love Richard Lewis this season. I feel like he has had seasons where he's leaned into and other seasons where he's not. And this season, it feels like he's really leaned into. And this is not a question, but I laughed so deeply hard at a small moment of him driving into Mocha Joe's and singing to himself about the croissant and coffee he was going to get. It was so stupid and funny.
I noticed that too.
I'm going to get my coffee and my croissant. Richard Lewis.
It's like an upbeat Richard Lewis. Yeah, he's great. He's so great.
Yeah.
Richard is, he's so sweet and funny. And, I grew up adoring Richard Lewis, and then to be on a show with Richard Lewis is just a dream.
I feel like the show over the past 20 years, 10 seasons, has done an amazing job of casting not just great actors and performers, but unique people, like the way that you describe Bob Einstein and Richard Lewis and JB. These are all extremely unique people that I feel like you could give them any line and you might laugh at how they said it.
Well, I think that goes back to Larry David.
Yeah.
He's the person that put all these people together. So I don't know.
And Jeff and Susie.
Yeah. I don't know how he does it. But it's the same with Seinfeld. You look at that cast and that group, and you're like, who thought of putting all these people together? Yeah. And Larry has Larry has such clarity about his vision, and I think about people.
Right.
So he he can look at somebody and know what's funny about them. So, and then I think too, we're lucky because the group really gets along well. And I've been on some projects where it's not always the case.
Of course.
Let's just say that.
Yeah.
Sometimes sometimes
Personalities can alley. Yeah.
Yes, but our group is everybody really likes each other. What do you think, shows?
Before I go to the next and last question, because I'm pretty sure I have to wrap this up, but I am curious about the ventriloquist scene that the two of you did, which that has never been in a.
No, it hasn't,
and it was presented as if they do this all the time.
all the time. But by the way, that's why I can't believe he left that in. I was laughing the whole time because, first of all, I kept saying to Larry and Jeff Schaefer, who's basically our showrunner and producer, I was like, this isn't how a ventriloquist works, right? It would be Larry doing the voice and me moving my mouth. And they're like, just do it. I'm like, do what? I don't even know what it is you want me to do. And they're like, once again, here's some lines we wrote for you. I was like, oh my God. Okay. And I'm looking at these lines and they're so dumb.
You've got your hand up my butt or something.
Yeah, you've got your hand up my ass.
This house smells like fish.
Yeah,
right?
This house smells like fish. It's like, what? First of all, what? How is this an old routine that we've done all the time?
And everybody loves it. That's what I was so weirded out by.
That's also, everybody was laughing so hard because Larry and I were laughing so hard because it was so dumb. We're like, this is one of the dumbest things that we've done on the show, and he just kept the laughter in, which was
it's the thing that brings the two of you back together, the two characters back together.
Ventriloquist act, and there's no setup about it at all. We're just like, for some reason, at a party, go up to Larry and say, "Hey, can we do our whole ventriloquist act?" It made no sense to me.
And for whatever reason, that is what makes her attracted to him again.
And then I want to have sex with him again.
Will they? Are they?
You tell me.
I don't know.
Will they? Won't they? I don't know.
Okay. Because
I do know, but I'm not going to tell you.
I like the idea of Ted becoming a kind of villain for Larry throughout the rest of this season. They're setting it up pretty well with him destroying the poster last night. Yeah.
Yeah. They are funny. Yeah, they love to hate each other.
And also Ted's awards campaign movie that he seems to be doing is very good.
Robert E. Lee.
Yeah.
Ted Danson is Lee.
One more.
Hey, Cheryl.
Hi.
I was just wondering, can you tell us what is the funniest thing that has ever happened to you behind the scenes at Curb Your Enthusiasm?
Jeez. That's a tough one because there are a lot. The funniest thing behind the scenes, well, there was an episode when this goes back a little, but my character had just taken colon blow. Hi. And Larry and I were in a car wash, and the car got stuck in the car wash. And I had to get out of the car because it was an emergency while the car wash was going. So I don't know. I just thought there was some sort of movie magic thing where there wouldn't actually be a car wash, but it was an actual car wash. And I had to get out of the car with the things going. And then Larry drives because, don't ask me why, but he sort of drives the car forward and ran over my foot slightly. I mean, it didn't break anything, but it didn't feel great. So it was one of those days where you're working and it's like, wow, I feel like I've been through the car wash and run over by a car. And it's like, oh, because you have.
Cheryl, I love the show so much. I'm so glad that it's back this season. I really hope that all of you do it as long as you can possibly do it. And it never goes away.
I know, I hope so too. Thank you.
Yeah, you said it in the green one I brought up. It's like a best friend coming back and just entertaining you. At this point, you feel very close to Larry and everybody.
I know, you do. I mean, even when I watched the first episode, I felt like, my old friends.
Yeah.
It's like, there's something about it. You know the characters, Larry's going to be an asshole and people are going to hate him, and you can't wait to watch.
Cheryl Hines, everybody. Let's hear it. Thank you so much.